All right, welcome everyone. We're about to take a whirlwind tour through the sweeping and, let's be honest, often turbulent history of the United States. We're talking about a journey that covers nearly 400 years, from just a handful of fragile colonies to a global superpower. So how did it all happen?
It's a great question, right? Is a nation just born in a single moment? Or is it something that's forged and constantly reforged over centuries of conflict, compromise, and change? Well, if you look at the American story, it's pretty clear it's the latter. So let's dive right in and see how this all played out. Our story really begins not with a country, but with an idea. And this idea, it was born from a conflict that had been brewing for a while between these scattered colonies, just clinging to the edge of a huge continent and this powerful empire way across the ocean.
So for more than a century and a half, think about that. From Jamestown all the way to the eve of the Revolution, these colonies were kind of doing their own thing. For the most part, Britain pretty much left them alone. But everything changed after the French and Indian War. That war was expensive. And suddenly, Britain needed cash. And they looked right at the colonies, imposing new taxes and more control. And that, right there, sparked a fire of resistance that finally just exploded at Lexington and Concord in 1775.
I mean, you really have to stop and think about how incredibly bold this was. In 1776, these 13 colonies just declared themselves independent. This wasn't just about taxes anymore. No way. This was a radical, world-changing idea that a government should be based on the consent of the people, not the whims of a king. But look, winning the war, that was just the beginning. The really hard part came next. How in the world do you take 13 really different, often bickering states and turn them into one single functional nation? That's where the Constitution came in. Drafted in 1787, it was this incredibly ambitious and, believe me, deeply debated blueprint for that massive job. So you've got this brand new nation founded on this amazing ideal of liberty. But right away, it was nearly torn apart from the inside. There was this deep division that would test what the word united even meant. Okay, so for the first half of the 1800s, the United States just exploded in size. The pace was absolutely breathtaking. And a big part of what was driving this was the idea of manifest destiny, this widespread belief that it was America's God-given right to stretch all the way to the Pacific. That's the idea that fueled the Louisiana Purchase, the push west, and even wars of expansion. But here's the thing. As the country got bigger, this huge split inside of it got wider and wider. You had the North, which was all about industry, factories, and paid labor. And then you had the South, which was still a farming economy, with its entire way of life built on the institution of slavery. It was like two different countries living under one flag. And that difference, that irreconcilable conflict over whether the new territories out west would allow slavery, well, it finally just erupted. It led to the American Civil War. This was a truly brutal, bloody war. It pitted brother against brother, and it's still the deadliest conflict in the nation's history. So, the Union wins the war. But now, the country faced this enormous challenge called Reconstruction. I mean, how do you even begin to rebuild the South politically and socially? And maybe the most critical question of all, what would be the rights and the role for millions of newly freed African Americans? It was a time filled with these huge questions about what freedom really, truly meant. The end of the Civil War really settled the question of the central government's power. And that, in turn, set the stage for America's next huge transformation, its rise into a global industrial powerhouse that was about to change everything. They call this period the Gilded Age, and man, was it an era of explosive growth. But there's a reason it's called gilded and not golden. On the surface, things looked amazing. You had railroads connecting the whole continent, tycoons making incredible fortunes. But underneath all that shine, there were some really deep social problems and massive inequality. And this image, this just perfectly captures that incredible spirit of invention from the time. Think about it. In 1903, the Wright brothers did something at Kitty Hawk that most people thought was pure fantasy. It was this perfect symbol of a future where technology was just completely rewriting the rules of what was possible for humankind. With all this new industrial power, it was pretty much inevitable that the United States was going to become a major player on the world stage. And the next half-century was a real roller coaster. You had the crazy highs of the Roaring '20s, the absolute crushing lows of the Great Depression, and then two world-shattering wars that would completely redefine America's role in the world forever. So, America comes out of World War II as one of just two global superpowers. And what happens next? It walks straight into a brand new kind of fight, a long, tense battle of ideas against the Soviet Union. And that, of course, was the Cold War. Now, this wasn't a hot war, not in the traditional sense. The two superpowers never fought each other directly. Instead, it was this global chess match, a struggle for influence that played out in things like the arms race, the space race, and all of it under the constant, terrifying shadow of possible nuclear war. And this ideological battle, it shaped pretty much all of American foreign policy for more than 40 years. It led to actual wars in places like Korea and Vietnam, and absolutely terrifying, down-to-the-wire standoffs like the Cuban Missile Crisis, which brought the entire world to the brink of nuclear war. But at the very same time America was fighting this global battle in the name of freedom, there was another huge conflict happening right at home. The civil rights movement was fighting to tear down racial segregation, demanding that the nation finally make good on its founding promise of equality for every single one of its citizens. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and just like that, the Cold War was over. That, plus the explosion of the internet, kicked off a whole new era. We're talking globalization, instant connectivity, and a completely new set of challenges for a world that was suddenly more interconnected than ever before. The 21st century, well, it's been defined by all new kinds of challenges, hasn't it? The September 11th attacks kicked off the global war on terror. The 2008 financial crisis was a brutal reminder of just how connected and fragile the global economy really is. And then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic literally brought the entire planet to a halt, all while the political and social divisions at home seem to be getting more intense. So when you look back, from a revolutionary idea to a nation torn in two, from an industrial giant to a global superpower, the American story is really a story of being constantly shaped and reshaped in the fire of conflict. It's a story of constant reinvention,